Okay, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Can you turn your speakers down a little bit, please, Jeremy?
Sure thing.
Yep. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to another LIDNUG live online presentation. We have just a few things to go through, as we do normally. First off, we've got to say a big thank you to our sponsors. We wouldn't be able to do any of this to anybody in the community if it wasn't for any of these sponsors that we have. We'd also like to say a huge thanks to RedGate, who are sponsoring today's talk and who provided Jeremy Jarrel to come and speak to us. Towards the end of the presentation, we will be doing a prize draw for a full copy of .NET Tool Belt. In order to qualify for the draw, you have to have registered via Eventbrite and be present in the presentation when we do the draw. As usual, here's our links. You can email us, info@lidnug.org. You can contact us via Twitter, Facebook, and our YouTube page, where this recording will be live and online fairly shortly after the presentation has finished. And we've also got a bit.ly short link there as well. Upcoming events, we did have originally scheduled for the 20th of February, the second in our RedGate series, with Anthony van der Hoorn building agnostic apps through the power of HTTP. Unfortunately, we may have to reschedule that, so if you keep an eye on our lidnugevents.eventbrite.com page, then latest date and time information will be posted on there as we know. This is Jeremy Jarrel's first ever LIDNUG event. He's the author of several articles on Simple Talk and D-Zone. You can catch him on Twitter at Jeremy Jarrel, and, well, he's got quite a presence online like most of us that hang around in places like LIDNUG. Without further ado, I'll hand over to the man himself. Take it away, Jeremy. Jeremy? Hello?
He turned himself down.
Oh, right, okay.
Okay, how about this?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Sorry, I didn't realise you turned your speakers that far down. Yep, take it away. The stage is yours.
Okay, so thank you all very much for giving me the opportunity to come in and speak to you today. I really appreciate it. Everyone logging on. So I've been very much looking forward to this opportunity. Of course, thank you very much to RedGate for giving me the opportunity as well. So just a bit about me. I think you guys did an excellent job already. But yeah, really nothing else to say. My name is Jeremy Jarrel. I've been a software developer for about 10 years. I'm pretty much most of that's been on the Microsoft stack lately, and really that's pretty much in ASP.NET. I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about getting started with performance tuning your .NET applications. I am here on behalf of RedGate. If you're not familiar with RedGate, they're a UK-based company, and they're really focused on bringing top-tier development tools to both .NET and SQL Server developers. If you do spend most of your days in .NET and SQL, and I'm guessing that probably applies to most of us here today, I would definitely encourage you to go check out their site. I've been a customer of theirs for a few years and couldn't be happier. They have a lot of things that really make your life a lot easier day to day in .NET and SQL. So let's talk a bit about performance tuning. Let me start with a question. How many times have you ever had to fix a performance issue in code that you wrote? Probably pretty often. You tend not to go very far in this industry before you find yourself faced with trying to tackle a performance problem in something that you've introduced. Let's put that aside. Let me ask you another question. How many times have you ever had to fix a performance issue in code that you didn't write? So that probably happens a little more frequently than any of us would like to admit. So which of those is tougher? Well, if you're like most people, trying to track down performance issues in code that you didn't write is actually much tougher than trying to track down the performance issues in the code that you wrote in the first place. I mean, a couple of reasons why that is. I think first and foremost is that whenever we're faced with a performance issue in code that we wrote, it's hard to know where to start. I mean, we don't know what the mindset of the original developer was that first tackled that problem. We don't know what the constraints that they were working against at the time, whether they be business rules, time pressures, or just the version of the platform that they had available to work with that day. And more importantly, we don't know how they approached the problem. We don't know where they started, and we honestly don't really know where that performance issue may even lie in the code. So let's imagine as an example, let's say that you're working on an e-commerce site, and it's an e-commerce site that sells CDs over the internet. And everything's humming along fine, everything's humming along happily. And then one day you realize that whenever you try to browse your inventory of albums, the whole site just seems to grind to a halt. It just seems to churn. And you're now faced with trying to track down the performance issue and why you can't display all the albums you have in inventory. Well, if you're like most people, you probably start out with something on a mindset something like this. You might say, okay, well, there's an action somewhere in the web app that's probably called get albums. It gets all the albums from the database. I know database calls are usually slow, so let's take a look at that code. Let's just dive in. And you might find yourself looking somewhere like here and say, okay, well, here's this get albums method. Well, what's inside of it? There's a session.load that probably pulls all the albums out of the data layer, and then there's a mapper.map that converts those albums to DTOs, so I can actually just play them back. Well, the mapper.map looks pretty innocuous. The session.load probably makes a database call, but honestly, this isn't my code. I've not written it. Either one of these could really be at fault. Oh, I know what I'll do. I'll add some logging statements. So I'll grab the start time before I take session.load. I'll grab the end time afterward. I'll take the difference between the two, and I'm going to write those out to a file. Then I might take the start time before I call mapper.map. I'll take the end time after I call mapper.map. I'll take the difference between those two, and I'll write those out to a file. Now I'm going to build the app. I'm going to deploy the app. I'm going to run the app. I'll log in. I'll go to wherever it is I need to go to repro the problem. Then I'll wait. Because it's a performance issue, it's going to take a little bit to repro. Then I'll shut down the app, and I'll open up this log file, and I'll pour over this huge log file looking for these calls to session.load and mapper.map. I might find these calls and discover, you know what, mapper.map only takes about a second. Session.load turns out to take
Jeremy, sorry,
seconds.
can I just put in a minute there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Your desktop isn't showing. I'm assuming that you're actually taking some people through your desktop? Yeah, we can't see anything.
Let's see what we can do here about that.
Just bear with us, folks. Yeah, go to Content, Share, and then you should be able to see Share Your Desktop.
How about that?
Yep, there we go. That's fantastic.
Beautiful. Okay, I apologize for that. All right. So anyway, so let's imagine we need this get albums call, and basically I've strewn log statements all through the get albums session here, and I'm just trying to figure out. Okay, well, you know what? Session.load turns out it looks like it takes about 14 seconds. Mapper.map, it turns out it takes about 1 second. So session.load is probably my problem. All right. So let's take a look at session.load. Maybe it's obvious in there what's going on. Get back to my PowerPoint here. I apologize, my laptop seems like it's a bit frozen here.
I was going to say you might want to reduce your screen size a little bit if at all possible as well.
Okay. Bear with me 1 moment, I apologize.
Yeah, it's been one of those days, everybody.
Yes, it has. And the sad part is that my day is only beginning. Uh, let's see here. Let's see if I can get my my PowerPoint deck back.
What seems to have happened there, Jeremy?
Let's see. Can you guys still see my PowerPoint deck?
No, I can just see your speed. Ah, there we go.
Okay. Let's see if we can get back to the slides we were at. Going to be running very, very slow. Oops.
That looks about right.
Okay. We can get back to where we were here.
There we go.
Okay.
We can have C code again.
Okay. See, my mouse unfortunately isn't responding incredibly well.
I think you can use the keyboard as well, I'm not sure.
Okay.
From what I remember, enter goes one forward, backspace goes one back.
Hey, what? Let's see. We don't have much in the way of PowerPoint anyway. Let's see if we can just get to Visual Studio, and then we'll just talk through the last slide or two.
Well, you're sharing your desktop, so anything you run on your desktop should just show up.
Excellent. Okay. All right, see if we can get it back. It still seems like it's struggling to respond a little bit.
Yeah, so you've got your slides displayed there.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah, I'm trying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Unfortunately, yeah, PowerPoint seems like it's locked up. And
I was going to say you might want to task kill PowerPoint, because I know sometimes when it gets into a mess like that during these presentations, we sometimes find that it does go absolutely ape, and the best way to do it's just to kill it basically.
Okay. Let me just kill it from here, because I don't have a great way to bring up the task manager in the VM, unfortunately.
Well, if nothing else, guys, you're getting a lesson in rescuing VMs when running under Microsoft Live Meeting.
Absolutely.
Live Meeting Rules 101, don't attempt to do anything live that you don't have absolute and 100% control over. And there we go, we can see Visual Studio there.
Okay, yeah, that's funny. You guys actually saw that before I did. Okay. Let's see if we can get it back here. Unfortunately, still looks like we're struggling to respond here.
It's probably because of the VM.
Yeah, I believe so. I agree.
We unfortunately we don't have good mileage using VMs with live meeting a lot of the time.
Yeah, I'm starting to I'm starting to see why.
Jeremy, are you
Yes.
running the VM on your desktop? And the
Yes, I am.
and the desktop is running live meeting.
No, actually, the VM is running. I'm sorry, live meeting is running inside of the VM.
All right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why
Yeah,
not?
I'm
The
actually
VM, I guess, is running the app inside WM now. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, I actually hadn't considered that. I mean, I can try running it from the host machine and just sharing the
Well,
sharing the VM.
generally what we do is we run the LM from within inside the VM.
Oh, okay.
So,
Yeah,
so
that's
live,
what I'm.
yeah, so live meeting is actually just broadcasting the VM's desktop.
Okay. Yeah, that's actually what I'm doing now. I'm running from inside the VM, or I'm running the live meeting from inside of the VM.
Well, are you able to continue? Let's see if we can continue.
I hate to say it, but I honestly don't think that I'll be able to, because unfortunately it's just not responding.
Right, okay, bear with me. How long would it take you to do a reboot, Gerald? Jeremy.
I could probably reboot into the VM in about 10 minutes.
Okay. Dan, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
How do you fancy doing an impromptu 10-minute slice on Silverlight?
Sure. Give me practice for Thursday night.
Right, folks. To those of you who are expecting to see Jeremy, as you've just heard, Mr. Wygant here, our resident LIDNUG Silverlight expert, is going to do a quick 10-minute segment on Silverlight for you all, and I'm going to go and try and see if we can get Jeremy's VM sorted out and what have you. Yeah?
Sure.
So, Dan, our audience is in your hands, mate.
This is the talk that I'm doing is really just a verbal. I don't have anything really I can show right away. At least I'm not set up to do that right now. But what I'm going to do then is I'm just going to go ahead and let them continue, and I'm just going to go ahead and talk. Basically, the talk that I've given once, and I'm giving again day after tomorrow in Mobile, Alabama, at the Lower Alabama .NET Users Group run by Ryan Duclos. The topic is just Visual Studio and Silverlight. The title is Through the Years with Visual Studio and Silverlight. Typically, I'd start out the talk talking about my history, and I'm just going to give you a real brief thing there because 10 minutes isn't a lot of time. I started out, my oldest brother taught me Fortran back in, I guess it was 72, something like that. And I was about 10 years old, 12 years old, I guess, 70, 72 time frame. And I really didn't touch programming again until I was in college. But it was a good introduction with cards and paper tape and all that wonderful stuff that we don't have to deal with these days. But, once I got my first job as a programmer at Intergraph, it was pretty great. You had all kinds of new tools. They actually had, you had your own monitor. But, about 2 decades later, I had been deeply involved in all kinds of user interface tools for building as opposed to make files, if you guys remember make files from back in the ancient days of Unix. And I guess some people are still doing that. But, you know, Visual Studio kind of evolved from this user interface design tool where you could do MFC, and eventually, you know, you went through iterations where they tried to do Java and got sued for that. And what they ultimately ended up with, I felt, was Microsoft's version of Java without the ability to run on any machine, which they had sued out of them. But shortly after all that came about, you know, people were writing a lot of stuff in HTML already, and the tools just weren't really there. ASP.NET was kind of a little bit palsy at it at first. And then around 2005, really, I thought that's where things totally changed. Scott Guthrie came in and changed everything. And then suddenly you had a new thing that wasn't this horribly configured HTML that you have no control over. And it was XAML. And I really liked that. That was in version, what did they call that? 3? No, that was 2.0. And, you know, through the next few years, they kind of did this new thing where they introduced giant component packages, WCF, WPF, what was it, card space, which nobody ever used, and, oh yeah, the World Wrestling Foundation, WWF, which they now changed to WF. And a good friend of mine used to call it info pain. But there was a time there where, you know, you were trying to get HTML and Ajax to work, and then suddenly here comes XAML, and you don't have to worry about malformed HTML going into production, or some, the horrible sort of things that you get in SharePoint. You just go ahead and code up this HTML-like stuff, and everything looks very much similar. You know, you have your left arrow button, backslash right arrow type deal where, you know, you open and close tags. Well, this was great, I thought, because it allowed people to do basically client or desktop type programming on their client. So you could be in a browser and you're writing desktop applications, and it's just really excellent. So then along comes 2008, and they've integrated all of this stuff, all these components. This is the trick that they were doing before Visual Studio.NET came out too, by the way. Back in the 90s, they did the same sort of thing. They introduced massive component packages. You as a user would install those component packages yourself. And then in the next version of Visual Studio, this is before .NET came out, and, you know, after .NET came out, then suddenly your next version of .NET has that stuff integrated into it, which is great. Especially for those of us who like to stay on the bleeding edge, because we would have a jump start into what this was all about. Well, I played with WPF back then, and then you start hearing about Silverlight very shortly after that. Really, it was WPF first in about 2006, and then 2008 it came out as integrated, and then shortly after that they came out with version 1 of Silverlight. Actually, they'd been talking about Silverlight before that, but I guess it was in the summer of 2008 where they actually started using Silverlight 1 in a really serious way with the Olympics. And then in 2008, I think October, November timeframe was when I first started using it. I'd seen it in a presentation at the DevLink conference, and I was just amazed that you could do these things. It was a great alternative to trying to get JavaScript working. So then through 2008 through now, I've really been pretty much primarily focused on Silverlight because it's such a totally excellent user interface. You don't have to deal with all the weirdness of postback. And believe me, I really understand postback, and it's not something that you want to send to your grandchildren, but XAML is definitely something that you'd think that would be a good thing for your people following behind you and would appreciate, because HTML was so horrible, and JavaScript and mixing all that together, in my opinion, horrible. Whereas being able to have this, are we back on?
Not yet.
Okay.
I'm not
Well,
that you can see anyway.
I'm going to go ahead and try to wrap this up a little bit while he finishes rebooting.
Well, I think just in case we can't get Jeremy back on and get his kit working, I think Dave Honey's just gone to have a look and see if he's got any MVC stuff, and I've just dragged a couple of little bits and pieces out that I can do an impromptu slot on. So to anybody who's joined us and wonders just what the hell is going on here, to coin a rather British phrase, it's organised chaos. I'll let Dan continue with his Silverlight bedazzlement, and I will be back with you just shortly.
Great. Well, as Silverlight started rounding up, they came out with version 3 and then version 4 and now version 5. They also came out with a version of Silverlight that we run on Windows Phone that was introduced in 2010. And I thought that was great. It's a slightly different model. With WPF, you call directly to your clients, and it's just a normal call and return paradigm. You can use asynchronous web services, but in my experience, the only time that you would really do that in WPF, you had a really long wait. So, for example, if you're going out to a WCF client that's on somebody else's server, like if you're going to trafficplan.com or something like that to pull back traffic pictures, that would take a long time. It could take, a minute and a half. So you'd use a busy indicator and try to do it asynchronously. On the other hand, in Silverlight and Silverlight for Windows Phone 7, you have the ability. Well, you don't have the ability. You have the requirement to do what's called asynchronous programming. And it's kind of neat, too, because somebody's unmuted. Peter, is that you? Okay. So what's great about the asynchronous model is that as you're waiting for things to happen, your user interface isn't stuck. You're in a browser. You don't really want to wait around for 5 or 6 different things to return with data. And especially if you're building a full-blown application as opposed to some little twiddly thing, you really want to let the user interface know that either something's going on or they're ready to work. And if you're doing asynchronous programming and doing it right, you can even make some of your user interfaces available while other ones have the spinning busy indicator or whatever you choose to show. When Windows 8 came out, this is kind of a new thing for us. They've picked up this, what we used to call the Metro design, and they've also added some new stuff. Like, for example, they've got the new subsystem for WinRT, which can either be HTML and CSS, or it can be XAML. And again, in this case, they've taken the .NET framework and compressed it down into a smaller chunk. It's not the full .NET framework for WinRT. Likewise with Silverlight, they did the same thing. They compressed the .NET framework down to just a few megabytes, so it was just instantly downloaded. But with WinRT, it's actually on the machine, so I'm not absolutely sure why they did that. But I think why they did it is that they're focusing more towards doing things related to online and things like Skydive and Azure And they want you to have that asynchronous model. They even added async and wait keywords to the C# language to better enable people that aren't really familiar with async to deal with that. And also people that are used to async would probably be able to use that and be able to program their code much quicker. I've been doing it for so long; it's second nature to me. And in fact, when I step into WPF, I keep seeing places where, gee, I would really think that should be done with async instead of just a straight call, because there's definitely going to be a wait there. But that's just my opinion. And so as you move forward in time, you're seeing Silverlight changing from being this just little bitty thing, not competing against larger subsystems like Flash and Java. In fact, there's more Java programmers than just about any kind of programmers. In fact, I believe that they are the number one set. And there's a lot more ActionScript programmers than Silverlight programmers too. But frankly, I feel like Silverlight and C# is the best. Beats Java by far. And there's just nothing good about ActionScript in my opinion. And the programming model, it's not maintainable. Same thing with Java. I don't really like their security model. So I feel like Silverlight wins there. And because they're moving forward with a Silverlight like thing with WinRT, I think that this kind of shows where they're really going with this. They figured out how to do Silverlight. Now they've got WinRT. And they've still got WPF. And I believe that this is a much better model than having to deal with crappy HTML. The only unfortunate part about it is that it doesn't work everywhere. Maybe that will change in the future too. Looks like we're back.
We're just doing a quick test, mate, so just bear with us.
Well, I like seeing Visual Studio there. That's great. So, kind of going towards a little bit of a wrap up here. What I've seen over the past 28 years in my professional life is a buildup of tools so that, when I first started, it was all make files. You had to be pretty good, too, to be able to go out there and figure out how to write the make files. And then they came up with make. So you didn't have to write make files. You just wrote files of what you wanted to make, and your make figured out how to do make. Then you went to tools like Sun had a pretty nice debugger, and at Intergraph we built our own debugger, which is also pretty excellent. Sun was a little bit better, I think. And then after that, it was Visual Studio for me personally, and Visual Studio just got stronger and stronger and stronger, and it's turned into this massive project where you can do just about anything in an excruciatingly short period of time. I mean, it's really kind of funny nowadays. They throw stuff at me that I'll estimate for 2 or 3 days, and I'll go and look at it, and bam, because of being able to use meth binding and asynchronous programming techniques, I'll have something running in a matter of a couple hours. I've literally gotten 4 days worth of work done in just a couple of hours by using really excellent, simple binding techniques.
Right, Dan, I think we're going to try and continue.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to go on mute then. Jeremy needs to be unmuted.
Yes, he does. Where are you hiding?
And thanks for the 101 people for listening to me ramble about Silverlight. Thanks, guys.
Right. Hang on. You're going to have to unmute yourself, Jeremy, because I don't have an unmute option for you, apparently.
There we go. How about now?
Ah, there we go. Fantastic.
Okay. So my apologies for all the technical difficulties. I really apologize for all of that. Hopefully we're in a spot now where we can get going. I assume everyone can see my screen. I know it's responding on my end, so I'm taking that as a good sign. So, okay. Let me pull my volume down just a little bit so I don't echo quite so much. So just to wrap up a bit of where I was before, basically this is how most of us I think have done performance profiling in the past. We've gotten ourselves in a situation where we take a guess that I think the problem is here. I string log statements all through the code, and I just keep drilling down again until I try to get there. Now, this isn't really a great solution. For one thing, it's very tedious. It's very time-consuming. Let's be honest. Developers are expensive, so it can be very, very expensive, and it's a tough conversation to have with your boss that you basically have to spend the last 8 hours kind of just strewing log statements throughout the code. But the real problem with this, the real kind of evil, nefarious issue here is that all of this is predicated on the entire success of this working is all dependent on the fact that we were right when we said, hey, you know what? I think that the problem is in get albums. And in actuality, the problems may not actually be in get albums. The problem can be anywhere throughout the code. Let's say, for example, it's not even pulling stuff in the database. Let's say, for example, that there's an HTML helper in the view that says on top of get albums that gets aggressive with text processing, and that is actually what's causing our issue. It's actually when it churns through all the data and churns through everything. That's actually what's killing us. Let's say it's not even in the view. Let's say we have an HTTP handler, and it has some instrumentation or some logging code that we've left in place and accidentally shipped, and that's trying to log out every single response that gets sent back to the client, and that's actually what's causing our issue. Let's say, for example, that it's not even on the server. Maybe it isn't even part of the app server itself. Maybe it's actually on the client, and we have a JavaScript grid with a third-party plugin that loops through every single row, every single cell that we return back, trying to ellipse size the text so we don't wrap. And that's actually what's chugging in. I mean, have you guys ever seen those? I'm sure you have. I know that I personally have seen every one of those instances. And what's interesting about it is that in every single case, from the Razor view to the HTTP handler to the JavaScript plugin, we've started with the mindset of saying, you know what? I think the issue is when we get the data from the database. And in every single case, we've gone down a rabbit hole, doing log statements everywhere, trying to track down and tune code that wasn't even really the root of our problem. So what's the solution here? Well, I happen to be a big fan of profilers. And what I like about them, and it's interesting, is I was aware of them for a long time, but what I like about them now is that they actually do a great job of really kind of looking at the whole picture of the code, showing you the big picture at once, so in a much more efficient way, you can see the broader landscape of where your issues are in the code. But what's interesting about it, for a long time in my career, I was actually very wary of them and didn't use them. And the reason was, whenever I would open one up, there would be lots of graphs, lots of charts, lots of data and numbers thrown at me. And I would always think, you know what, I'm sure my answer is somewhere here inside of this data, but this just seems so intimidating, seems so overwhelming. It's going to be much quicker for me to actually get in and to actually just dive into the code with these log statements and just put things everywhere I need to go and track down the issue. What I'm hoping, if you guys get anything out of this today, aside from not trying to run a live meeting inside of VirtualBox, I'm hoping if you get anything else out of this today, what I can get across to you is that the profilers really aren't intimidating. They're not overwhelming, and that there's a lot of data in there that's very useful. They can save you a ton of time, and that a good profiler really kind of adheres to the 80-20 rule, and the fact that you can really solve 80% of your performance issues with about 20% of the features that exist there in the profiler. So I'm sure we don't want to see code or see PowerPoint all day. So let's look at some code. So the example I'm going to be working with today is the ASP.NET MVC Music Store. This is a great reference app if you're looking to learn MVC. This actually came out with MVC 3. I can't recommend this highly enough. It's an excellent soup to nuts implementation of how MVC really runs in the real world. So let's take this as an example, and let's imagine back to our e-commerce example that we're part of a startup that's selling CDs over the internet, and we're demoing the site to our boss. We've just finished the site. We go live tomorrow. The boss, the CEO of the company, who has mortgaged his home and savings to bring this idea to fruition, is very thrilled. We can browse by genre, we can browse for product detail, we can do all kinds of things. It's a great site. And he looks at this and says, you know what, this is awesome, ship it, this is exactly what we need. So us being the great developer, we say, okay, it's ready to go. You know what, we got to make one change because we actually didn't want to develop against a full production database because that takes a long time. Developers are expensive for our, we don't have that kind of time to fill. We actually we're working against a small developer database. So let's just update our connection string so we point to production, and then let's just ship this app out. And we're building and we're running, and here we go. The boss is excited. We're cracking champagne. We're waiting on the site to load. Sorry, we're still shipping champagne. Still enjoying ourselves. The mood's still light. Now we're going on about 10 seconds, about 15 seconds. And this is the point where you start to have that kind of uncomfortable conversation, that uncomfortable eye contact with your boss, who's now wondering why he put up his life savings to bring you in as the rock star architect to build this e-commerce site that's now completely failing to load once it sets on top of real data. So but that's okay. It's a code hit on IIS. Sometimes those take a while. We're still hopeful. We'll see what happens. I'm sure things are going to run. Let's just give it some time. We can put our boss's fears to rest and allay the whole situation, and we'll be good to go. We just have to let this run. And here on day one, on go live, we now have our error problem. We now have our error page. So we now have a performance issue that we have to track down. And we can be fairly confident it is a performance issue because we just saw the site work perfectly well on a tiny database. If we want to think about this a little bit, we have a developer database. Just to put some things in perspective, our developer database has about 250 albums over about 150 artists. Our production database that I'm sitting on right now has about 60 million albums over about 15 million artists. If that seems high, I will say I will share that the Amazon CD inventory is about 67 million CDs. So if we are really building this e-commerce site to get out there and really compete with the big boys in the e-commerce playing field, then we need to be able to match that scale. So we need to be able to somehow handle that. So how are we going to tackle this? Well, we know we have a performance issue. We know that it's probably server side because we didn't see the screen frost over, so it's most likely not a JavaScript error. And what we actually got an error code back from the server, so I think we can be fairly confident server side. So this is what we're going to bring in a profile. So the profile I'm using today is ants. This is actually from RedGate. So we can see when we open up, we can work with pretty much any type of .NET app. We can use executables, which are your WPF one-form console apps. A whole plethora of ASP.NET apps, anything from Silverlight to SharePoint. I'm going to be running on ASP.NET. I'm actually going to be using IIS because that's I'm deployed out to my local IIS server. I cannot stress enough, please deploy out to the environment that matches what you're deploying to. I'm sure we'll never be able to match into our production environment on our laptops, but you can save yourself so much pain, not just in performance, but in development in general. I mean, if you can at least have the same SKUs of IIS and SQL that you'll be deploying to in production. So I'm running on production here. And then I'm basically just going to leave everything else as it is, and we're just going to start running. And then what's happening here behind the scenes is that Ants is essentially instrumenting my code and redeploying this out to my IIS server in the sense that we'll be able to now see when the different methods enter and leave the call stack. So what's also happened in the meantime, notice it's actually launched the system browser. So it popped up an Internet Explorer. In our case, since the only thing that we need to do to repro our problem is just hit the home page, this will be fine for us. If you do find yourself in a situation where you have an app that, say for example, is very JavaScript heavy, that uses a lot of advanced CSS and HTML, it's something that may work better on other browsers. There's actually no reason why you need to repro the issue underneath Internet Explorer. The only thing that Ants is actually listening for are requests that come out of the server. So you can actually, once the Internet Explorer browser opens up, you can open something else like Chrome and Firefox and repro the issue there, and Ants will still capture everything. Okay, and now we've reproed our issue. So I'm going to switch back to Ants. I'm going to stop the profiling. So a couple things just want to call out. So you'll see here that there are a couple graphs here. The red graph is basically my processor time or my CPU load, CPU activity. Green is my I/O read, and this flat line here, purple, is my I/O write. So these are just standard perf counters that I'm bringing in from the system. You can bring in any standard perf counter to display this graph. The reason I like to use these three is that I've seen in my experience that most performance issues tend to correlate with either a CPU spike or an I/O spike, or at least a large majority of them. So if I'm trying to track down exactly where a performance issue happens, a lot of times if I just look for these I/O spikes in the timeline, or CPU or I/O spikes in the timeline, it's very obvious to me which section code I need to be looking at. So what we're looking at on the lower side here is essentially all the methods that existed in that call stack during that repo session that we just ran through. So I want to call it a few things. So the first entry point we see is actually the application root. It went out to a dedicated port, but the local host is actually the root of our application. You can see that this is actually tagged with an HTTP request. What this tells us is that this came in with an incoming HTTP request, and I can actually, even though we had a simple repro session here, I can look at just the HTTP request and see everything that comes in. This is excellent if you're working with either a web API or an MVC app, in which case the entry points to your applications are typically very clear-cut HTTP requests, especially on web API. This is a great way to actually just to get a broad overview of what kind of API requests are responding well, and which ones could be responding a little better. So we can see right here, here's the main root of our application, about 45 seconds. This was our entry point. We'll hop back in, and then under this is all the .NET code that actually exists underneath that. So the local host, recall, basically mapped down into the home controller.index section. And then we can actually see in here that this actually came down into our get top selling albums method, and this actually maps down. So what we're looking at, and we can actually see the line numbers called, or so you can see the time called out here, that our localhost root application came into our home controller.index action. That called out to our get top selling albums method, and we can see that method itself took about 40 seconds. Now, unfortunately, the only thing that was happening in our get top selling albums method was an entity framework call. So this is basically the end of our application code right now, and now we jump into SQL. This is one thing that I really like about ANS, is that it's a full stack profiler. In other profilers I've worked with, you'll often find yourself having to basically profile once with the application profile. And then once you hit the wall, or once you've kind of left the code and understand your problem is in database code, you then have to repro the entire issue again using something like SQL Server Profiler, or in this case, the Entity Framework Profiler. But in this case, we have everything tied in together, so we can actually drop down immediately, and we actually get into the SQL Server code. So, and we can actually, by looking at our wall clock time, we can see that the vast majority, the vast bulk of our time is actually this first SQL Server call. So there were 3 calls generated by the Entity Framework block, but the ones that we're actually interested here are this main select statement. So let's take a look at the select statement. I'm going to pull it out, and I'm going to open it up in Management Studio. I'm going to switch to my production database. Okay. And here's basically the select statement. So I'm going to run this once with our execution plan, and while it runs, we'll talk a little bit, but I'm going to go ahead and turn on the execution plan, and I'm going to run this just to take a look at what we get. While that's running, let's talk about what this query is actually doing. So the function this came out of it was a method called get top selling albums. So if we look at what we're actually looking at here, it looks like that basically we're looking at all the order details, and we're getting the number that we're getting the amount of times that each album ID occurs in that order details. So to put it another way, we're basically looking at all the orders that have been made across the site and figuring out which albums tend to appear in those orders the most, and that's how we define, for the purpose of this case, the top selling album. Now, while this is running, if you remember, I also turned on the execution plan. we talked a little bit about what an execution plan actually does. So SQL is what we consider a declarative language. And what that means, as opposed to a language like C#, which is more imperative, is that instead of us telling the SQL Server query engine, here's how I want you to solve the problem, we actually come to it with an answer and say, with a question, say, here's what I want you to answer. I want you to tell me what the top selling albums are, what the most commonly occurring albums in the orders are that match their constraints I've put in here. And then SQL's query engine will then take our query, will look at the schema of the database, look at what it knows about the data makeup of those tables, the actual schema of the table, how they relate, and it will come back with what it considers, here is the most efficient way that I can answer that question for you. That most efficient way is the query plan. So if we look at our query plan that's just popped up here, and at first glance, query plans can be a little intimidating, but they're actually pretty easy to read, because it turns out you're not really interested, for our purposes, in about 90% of what you see here. What I will tell you is that you typically read a query plan from right to left, because it basically is a query tree. So we'll start at the right, and we'll essentially work our way over to the left. Now, what we're looking at, you might see these cost operators here. What the cost operator is, or cost percentage is, this essentially tells us, of the total CPU load that this query created, here's how much of that CPU load was a result of these particular operations. So we can see, for example, there was a clustered index scan here, but it was basically 0% of our query load. So it had no impact on the overall performance of our query. So it's not something we're really interested in. So we're just going to work left to right, looking for any high cost. And here's a 1%, but that's not really too much to worry about. And we get all the way over here, we see a sort. We can see here this sort is actually 99% of our query. And if we look on the bottom here, we'll see this sort actually maps to an order by. So we can see that where this is actually coming from is this right here, this order by, this C1 column and this title column. And as a matter of fact, if we take this out, as a matter of fact, I'll open this up in a new window. And if we drop out the actual order by and run this again, whoops, stripped out of parentheses. If we had, I won't spend time here in the interest of time, but what we would see is that this query actually executes pretty much instantaneously, because this order by is just so impactful to our time. So we need to figure out how to tune the order by. Well, there are a couple options we can look at. Typically, we would tune an order by trying to index the column that we're actually ordering on. Because as of right now, if we don't have an index, SQL Server is doing what's called a scan, which essentially means that for every column or for every value that it needs to insert in the correct order, it basically has to do a full table scan of every record in that data set and come back and say, is this value greater than or less than those values? So it knows where to insert the actual value. However, if we can index that column, it can be dramatically more efficient at determining where in that data set this value needs to go. So let's take a look here. Let's take a look here. Basically, what we're looking at, so our order by is coming off a projection. So our projection, it turns out, is basically the select star from this subquery. So that's bad news, because there's really no great way or no easy way to index a subquery. And if we look a little closer, so we have two columns in our order by. One is a title. The title actually comes off is actually coming off a basic table, so we might be able to do something with that. But the C1 column is actually a count, so it's essentially a derived column. So what we're looking at is a subquery within a subquery. That's not great from a performance standpoint. So there are a couple options we have. One might be to actually we could carve off this subquery into a temp table. It probably doesn't need to be expressed as a subquery. We could index that temp table and then join against that to get the information we need. Now we could then push this off into stored procedure. That would work. I'd like to hold that as kind of the last option. So I don't like to use stored procedures often, and I definitely don't like to hide what I would consider business rules, and this is a business rule of what we consider a top selling album inside the stored procedure. But if performance warrants it, I'd absolutely be open to it. And another option is that we're running into kind of that classic trade-off of, hey, we have a database schema that's very transactional, because it's an e-commerce application, but now we're trying to report on it. And so a transactional, a highly transactional database schema tends to not lend itself very well to reporting. So as a long-term solution, we could actually consider splitting off a separate schema that's much more friendly to reporting queries. We could heavily denormalize it, we could flatten out the schema, and it would work much better for that. And then that would actually give us a lot of legs to stand on for as we started having more and more of these business rules that come up in the app. However, if we remember actually where we are, our e-commerce site is launching tomorrow. Our boss is very upset. We're coming back to him and saying, hey, I've got a great solution. We just need to design and set up a whole other database and design some sort of a service that keeps those two schemas in place, and then update all of our queries to now read from the new database. It'll take about a week and a half to 2 weeks, which probably means 6 weeks. He's probably not going to be real thrilled with that option, so that's a non-starter for us. So if we step back for a moment and think, well, what's the real thing that's happening here? What's actually going on? As we said before, we're basically just taking we're looking for the number of times an album appears in the order details. So if we just express this query a little differently, so if I say something like select star from order details, oops, and we group by the albums and the album ID, and we bring that in, and we'll order by count. We'll do descending, and you know what? We don't even need them all, so we'll just say top 5. Then this query gets a lot more manageable. As a matter of fact, the only thing we're actually missing is the album information. I don't know if I still have my results here. Let's bring them up. Nope, I don't. But the only thing we're really missing is the album information. So all we really need to do then is just to join in against our album table. And bring in the relative information we're interested in. So we'll make these columns unambiguous, and then we'll bring in just some basic information for demonstration's sake, like title and price. We'll add those into our group column. And now we basically have the query. The only thing we're missing, we had additional order by, which we're ordering them by title. So we'll just say order by count, descending, a.title, descending, ascending. And here's the exact same results that we were getting from our query before. However, instead of now taking 30 to 40 seconds to run, it's now taking sub-second time. So what we can now do is take this exact query, and since we're using Entity Framework under the hood, we can just go back to our query here, and we can essentially pipe this SQL straight in. I know typing this by hand, I'll never get this correct, so I have a snippet that does exactly that. We'll comment out this. And here's that query that we designed in the actual query analyzer, just typed in directly using the Entity Framework SQL query. Now, if we redeploy and run the app, the app will actually run much more performant and be much more efficient. So while that's deploying, we're actually running right now. We'll go ahead and let that open since we're hitting IIS code. But while that's deploying, I would like to give you guys a few resources. By the way, here's our top selling album. So this is much better, especially to our boss, who now can sleep a little easier. This is much better than the results that we were seeing here, and we were able to track it down in literally a matter of minutes, just with the use of a profiler. So just to wrap up, so I want to give some time for Q&A, and I know we got a late start. I want to give you guys a few resources that we can leave with. So a couple of things that are really great to work with. The first thing is an ebook. This is called Practical Performance Profiling. This is actually put out by SimpleTalk, which is one of the publishing arms of .NET. It's by a gentleman named Jean-Philippe Jarrell. This is an excellent book. I can't recommend this highly enough. What I love about this book is that it's a great mix of some kind of basic performance profiling steps, and then a very deep dive into performance profiling specifically for .NET. So what I actually recommend, if you're just getting interested in performance profiling, you're just kind of getting your head around it, check out the first chapter, which is about 90 pages, and Jean-Philippe does an excellent job of really diving into a lot of the concerns and a lot of the best practices around profiling that we didn't really have time to talk about today. For example, one of the points that he makes is, hey, we're profiling today. We profiled on a laptop with SQL Server and IIS, all running on the same machine. In a production environment, that's probably not going to be the network topology you're looking at. So you're probably going to have those on separate machines, which means you're also going to incur some network latency moving between those types of things. And he just has some excellent advice about how you need to account for that and why you need to keep that in mind. Once you get your head around the things in the first chapter, there's a great deep dive into just the different performance issues and different ways to tackle common performance problems with .NET. I really recommend get very familiar with the first chapter, then just kind of familiarize yourself with the second part of the book or the rest of the book, and then you have the option when you do start to see some of these performance issues, you can recognize them, and even if you don't remember the solution, you can recognize enough to say, oh, here's that solution that was in that practical performance profiling book. Let me go back and look it up and see what the solution is. So it's available for free as a download from redgate.com. You can also buy print versions from Amazon as well. The other book that I recommend just came out. It's 50 Ways to Avoid, Find, and Fix ASP.NET Performance Issues. This was also put out by RedGate, and it was a community project and contains a lot of great performance tips from different people in the ASP.NET community. It's an excellent book. You can download this for free as well. And what's great about this book is that all these tips are very, very nugget sized, and they're very, very easily digestible. So I'm sure you'll learn at least a few things. You pick up a few things a year. I know I picked up a ton of tips just flipping through that book. There's some great guys in there like Troy Hunt, some very big names in ASP.NET who've really contributed some great tips to this book, and they're very, very, very easy to read. So I'd really recommend picking that out. The last thing I'd also like to call out is the Advanced Performance Profiler. That's what we use a little bit today, just to track down this issue. It's available as a 14-day trial from redgate.com as well. What I would recommend, I hope something you've taken away from this today is that even though profilers are very powerful, they're really not that tough to get up and running on. And then once you understand what they're doing, it's very easy to track down the information that you need in the profiler. However, I will say that the time to learn how to read a profiler, the time to learn how to get your code deploying and building underneath the profiler is not at 11:30 at night when the CTO has called you, gotten you out of bed to your production side is down because you have a performance issue. The time is on a nice Friday afternoon when you have some easy time to kill, and you can actually take the time to get your head around it. So I would really recommend to take some time this week, download a profiler to get the trial, to understand how to get your code deployed and running underneath it so it can be profiled. So then when that call inevitably does come at 11:30, and they always do, then you have a starting point on those late night calls. You can actually track down the issue much quicker and get what you're saying. Another thing I'd recommend too, if you have any team leads in the audience, one of my favorite exercises to do with teams is actually to take a branch of the code and to just introduce some performance Easter eggs in it, whether they be as simple as sweep statements hidden in some innocuous-looking methods, or pulling indexes off key tables in your database schema, but somehow or another, on a nice safe branch of the code, bring down some performance issues on your common feature paths of the code, and then for lunchtime, get your entire team in the conference room, spring for pizza, and have everyone in the team download a copy or a trial of the profiler. So then you can have a bug hunt. You can even make it fun and make it competitive in the sense that whoever finds and corrects the most performance issues by the end of the lunch hour wins a gift card or an extra day off. Just something to make it interesting. The goal is that the goal is to get everyone on your team, to get them comfortable with these tools, to get them comfortable with the mindset of how you track down performance issues, where you find them, what the common causes are, so everyone on the team is ready to go. And unfortunately, I've noticed that a lot of development managers or development leads like to consider performance profiling a specialized skill. I think it's a very broad skill that everyone on the team needs to have. This is not something that you want only one person in your team to know how to do. so take a nice lunch hour with your team. Get everyone together with copies of the profiler. Spring for pizza, and I promise you it'll pay you back in spades. So, in the interest of time, that's all I've really got today. Once again, I apologize for all the connection issues we had. It's still valuable and still worth it. Here's my Twitter address. I'll actually be posting these slides out on SlideShare in a bit. So if you'd like to check out the resources, there are links to all those in the slides. You can get them directly from there. Also, if you guys have any questions, whether about performance or anything after the fact, please don't hesitate to send me a message on Twitter. I'd be more than happy to answer any question you have, or barring that, I can find someone who knows the answer. So once again, thank you all for logging on today. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your patience. And I'd like to open the floor to any questions you may have.
You have 3 questions in the Q&A, Jeremy.
Okay. Oh, so you have it right here.
So I'll let you answer them. We're just doing the prize draw now.
Okay.
So we'll have a name for you shortly, hopefully.
Let's see here. This may not have been for me. Do you think Microsoft's going to continue to offer the IE Silverlight add-on? Was that in relation to the Silverlight talk that was earlier?
Actually, that shouldn't still be in there. I think you're looking at so if you click on the Manage tab.
Okay.
There you go.
Oh, okay. I apologize. Okay,
so
here we go.
You can tear that off and resize it, and if you click on the question, it'll put it in the box below, and you can answer. And then if you just tick the little tick box at the side once you're finished with it, somebody will take it out the list for you.
Okay. So the first question is from Bill Walter. What if in addition to the code in the application, there are stored procedures, functions trigger the database that may be happening as a result of the interaction of the database? That is an excellent question, and that's something that we definitely see a lot. I would say if it is stored procedures, you will actually still see the stored procedure show up here. You'll simply see it show up as an exec call. So yeah, I've seen that myself. Triggers, I can't say for sure. And I can't say for functions. I've never called functions directly to .NET code. At that point, what I would recommend if you get into functions and triggers, that I would open up SQL Server Profiler, which ships for free, or I should say, ships included anyway with the additions of SQL Server. They'll leave everything but Express, and then you can use the SQL Server Profiler tool to actually to get the information out of there. And I will say I don't have time to go into it as well deep today, but one thing that you'll learn with SQL Server Profiler is that it generates a lot of information, and it generates a lot of data. There are 2 ways to process that data efficiently. You can save that file or save the results off as a trace file, and there is a free tool called ClearTrace that will open up those files, and then we'll put them in a format that they can be easily queried. So essentially, you'll end up with a lot of duplicate information. ClearTrace does a great job at grouping that data together, and then you can actually get in and see the big picture of how all those statements are adding up. There also is a function, and I'm afraid the name eludes me at the moment, but there also is a function built into SQL Server that will take in a trace file, and we'll create a table from that, and then you can actually query the trace file there in a SQL table, and that's very, very powerful. If you find yourself in some very SQL heavy profiling session, that's a great way to actually get in to make sense of the profile results. What a CTE might be a better alternative or more reasonable alternative to adding the columns to the group by. Would that be more attractive if it wasn't a top 5 need all? Absolutely. That's from Mark Friedman. That's a great way to do it. If you're not familiar with CPE, it's essentially a way to do recursive SQL queries, and they're tricky to get your head around. But once you do, they're very, very powerful. In this sense, it would be it would actually generate, or actually could create much more elegant SQL than you see than you would have seen me write in excuse me, you would see me write in SQL Server, but it's a CTE would have created a much more elegant solution than what I did before. Okay. Let's see. One question from Carl Doyle. There's a lot of information gone through. It'd be possible to link to all this to go over again. Yeah, that's a great example. Let me talk to Peter. I mean, once again, I definitely apologize for the technical difficulties that we had. So maybe we can do this just with myself as a full hour session recording. And I know Peter, we recorded this as well, so we can do this as a recording. If we can't work with the session we have recorded here, we can definitely record a new session that we can submit out to the group. Yeah, we would definitely be able to accommodate that. Do you ever use trace for profiling? That's from Dan Wygant. I've seen people do that. I personally haven't. The reason why I say I haven't recently, that's the reason I've stopped doing that as often is that it's more similar. It's felt more similar to the log statements to me, in the sense that it works well if I guess the right place where the performance problem is in the first place. As long as I'm right when I guess where to put the trace statements, it should work fine. But I've not used it recently because frankly I found myself wrong more often than I was right when I assume where the performance statement actually is. Actually is. Okay. We have a question for Spin. In case of profiling a Windows service, is the service stopped, instrumented, or started for profiling? I've actually never profiled a Windows service from Answer and pushing. I don't know the answer to that, but I would guess that would guess that it probably is, and I'm basing that on the fact that whenever I profile an ASP.NET application, the ASP.NET service, or the W3WP service is stopped and instrumented before profiling. So I would guess that a Windows service, and so IIS is more or less the same thing. If you were profiling a Windows service, it would do the same thing. One option that you may want to explore, I didn't get too into it today, but there are actually two common modes of profiling available, and this is true not just in AS, but across all profilers. The one I was working with today is called instrumenting profiling or detailed profiling, and what essentially happens is that the profiler will instrument the method calls, so we can understand when the different methods move in and out of the call stack, and then we can know exactly how long each method took. That gives us a lot of detailed information, and it gives us a lot of information to work with, so we're much more likely to find the issue. The drawback to that is that you may have noticed that there is a significant impact to the performance of the issue while you're reproing it. In our case, it wasn't too bad because our performance issue to start was only about 30 seconds, so it increased the total repro time to about 45 seconds. But I've worked with other teams that have had performance issues in Windows Forms apps that have taken an hour, 2 hours to run, or the performance issue itself is around 45 minutes. It took about an hour and a half to profile, and that just wasn't feasible with a line level profile or an instrumented profile. So what I would recommend instead is there's another option, and it actually will show up here. Let me see if I can pull it up. Called sampling, and this is something that you see available in most profilers. you have what's called sample method tiling. And what happens here with sampling profiles is that instead of instrumenting the code, you actually just take snapshots of the call stack on regular intervals, and then based on what methods have moved in and out of the call stack between the snapshots, you can extrapolate about how long each method took to run. That's it's less accurate and gives you less information to work with. But if you're working with a very long running operation where it's just not feasible to profile it with instrumentation, that's a good way to at least get a high level ballpark of where your problem is. So the reason, just to bring this background, the reason I mentioned this as a result of Windows service, Windows service, if you have to profile in Windows service and if it's not feasible for you to start and restart the Windows service before you profile, you might want to consider sampling. I honestly can't say for sure that I haven't used sampling for a while if sampling starts and restarts the process, but I would say it's less likely that it does it for instrumentation than instrumentation profiling would. So I hope that helps. I wish I could give you a more specific answer, but hopefully that'll at least give you some places to get started. Chris has a question here before compare ants to some of the other profiles out there. Yeah, absolutely. So as opposed to some of the other profiles I've worked with, you mentioned JetBrains has one. JetBrains has a nice profiler called .trace. It's a very nice as well. The reason I find myself using ants more is that ants has that full stack profiling that I spoke about, in the sense that I can see in a single session where the app code and where the database code tend to intermingle. When I worked with .trace from JetBrains, and granted this was several years ago, I haven't looked at it recently, but when I worked at it before, what I often found myself doing was trying to profile the app server code, and then essentially I had a wall whenever I ran out of SQL, and then I would when I hit SQL, and then I have to profile the issue again with the SQL Server Profiler, and then kind of fit the results together. So like I said, it's still very nice profiler. That's just why I haven't preferred ants over it. I honestly have not worked with the Visual Studio Performance tools. At least I know as of 2010, I believe they were only available in Ultimate Edition, which I've not had access to with the teams I've worked from. Something else you may want to consider though. There's a profile put out by the Stack Exchange team. I think they call Mini Profiler. That's a very nice profiler. It's open source. The only drawback to it is that it's invasive in your code, in the sense that with ants you don't have to make changes to your code. You just start it up, and it makes the changes itself. So there's nothing special to put in your code to do it. With Mini Profiler, there are some calls that you have to actually put in your code. So you have to either be able to you have to be willing to leave those calls in there, or be able to take a second branch of your code, put the calls specifically in where you need them, and then go with there. But that is also a very nice tool. Mark has asked any thoughts about trying to tune the SQL performance of .NET apps that use link to entities. So what I would say, I guess probably two things I'd look at. One, there's a I don't know if it would work for link to entities, or an ENI who creates it in a Hibernate profiler has a similar profile for entity framework. You may have something for link to entities. I would look there, and also the same SQL would show up here as a data for entity framework, because the profiler is essentially just capturing the SQL as it comes out. As far as if you're trying to tune the SQL performance of it, the absolute best thing, the best thing I can say, just as a general rule, is that there's something called it's like an N+1 error, which essentially means that if you, let's say in our case of an e-commerce store, I need albums, I need 50 albums on the page, instead of being able to batch batch that up and make 50 or pull all 50 albums at once. With an ORM, and it isn't linked to entity specific, but ORMs in general, it's very easy to find yourself in a situation where you write a code where you essentially make 50 individual calls to pull to pull each album down one at a time. That can be murder to performance, and that's just kind of a kind of a result of any ORM that we don't think about in the sense because we write it like imperative code or like procedural code, and we don't necessarily think of the set operations that are available for us. The biggest advice I could give you is to be very wary of anything anywhere in your code where you're using linked entities or any ORM that it looks like that you would actually you could actually benefit from pulling down a bunch of items from the database in a single batch versus simply going through a for loop and looping through everything and getting everything at once. Okay.
Hi, Jeremy.
Yes.
Just want to jump in a second there. We've got
Sure.
about 8 minutes or so left.
Okay.
We have a prize draw winner. As you know, RedGate are giving away a copy of .NET Tool Belt. Hello?
Hello, you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Michaela.
Brilliant. Okay, so are you okay for me to announce the winner, Peter?
Yeah, fine. Go ahead.
Okay, well, the winner is John Bagley. He signed in on live meeting as John. And John, you've won a license of our .NET Toolbelt, which includes ANT's Performance Profiler, which Jeremy's been talking about today, ANT's Memory Profiler, .NET Reflector VS Pro, .NET Daemon, SQL Connect, SQL Prompt Pro, and Smart Assembly. So you've got a whole load of tools from RedGate there, and we'll be sending you the license probably tomorrow morning, if that's okay with you.
He'll not be able to come in, I don't think, because most attendees are muted. But congratulations, John. If you need to talk to Michaela to exchange details, just right-click on her name in the attendees list and select chat, and you'll be able to talk to her directly. It's Michaela Murray.
Thank you. Congrats, John.
Right, Jeremy, back over to you.
Okay, I just have a few more questions to wrap up. I also want to call out, if you guys can see this on my screen, but as it was Finn, Michaela, who you just heard from RedGate, actually chimed in with the with an answer to the profile Windows service. And what she says is that whenever you do profile Windows service, normally it would actually get restarted, but there is an option where you can attach to the running process, and then you can actually profile the service without forcing a restart. So that's actually I didn't realize that either, but that's a great tip. Hopefully that helps you to be able to profile your services. Okay, and two more questions. One from Dan. What do you think about Microsoft Test Manager for profiling and debugging? Honestly, Dan, I have to say I've never had the pleasure of working with Microsoft Test Manager, so I actually can't speak to that. If someone else has and would like to chime in, please feel free to. You could probably message me, and I'll be happy to share your response with the rest of the group. But I unfortunately have never had the opportunity to work with Test Manager, so I can't speak to that. And then one more question from Krishna: is the ANT Memory Profiler a better alternative to CLR Memory Profiler? I'm sure that's subjective. For me, I tend to like it better. And the reason is, a lot of the reasons are, one of the things I mentioned earlier, I can kind of do a full stack profiling where I can look at .NET and SQL. That the code I tend to work with these days tends to be very SQL oriented as well. So there's a lot of interaction between .NET and SQL ants gives me the big picture. So I like that. I'm sure it's a very, very subjective opinion. I will say that the team I'm currently working with, we do a lot of work with compact framework, and we have found that while ants is great for being able to track down the performance issues in our web applications, that CLR memory profiler has been very good for helping to track down some of the legacy compact framework issues. So that's been helpful. If you do work with compact framework a lot, that may be something you want to consider. I'm sorry, I actually misread the question. The question was, is the ANTS memory profiler a better alternative to CLR memory profiler? So I didn't talk about ANTS memory today. If you guys, if you're not familiar, there actually are two products in the ANTS line. There's a performance profiler that we saw today. There also is a memory profiler for tracking down memory leaks. Still, I would say in my experience, I tend to like the advanced memory profiler better, just because it gives me more information to work with. But as I said before, on the team I'm currently working with, we've found actually the same case. We've actually found that ANTS memory is great for tracking down the memory issues with our database. We actually just solved a huge issue with it just a few weeks ago. But we found that whenever we work with a compact framework, the CLR memory profile, it tends to work itself. It tends to lend itself very well for that, just because it's a little bit more legacy code. So that's all the questions I've got on my queue. I hope I answered all of those to your satisfaction. Like I said, my Twitter address is on the PowerPoint deck. I'll bring it back up here just for the time being. But if you guys think of anything in the time being that you would like to that you didn't have the opportunity to ask, or any expansions on, please don't hesitate to message me on Twitter, and I'll like I said, I'll either try to answer it myself, or if I can, we'll find someone that can get the answer for you.
I think you'll get quite a lot of new followers. If there's one thing that we can definitely say for most people that we've seen that put their Twitter address on these LIDNUG presentations we do, their Twitter stream usually goes pretty nuclear afterwards.
Oh wow, well, that would be great. It'll be good encouragement for me to keep my Twitter stream a little more interesting. Then so it's not just pictures of my dogs and where I've eaten. So.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, we had some technical difficulties. I think we got through them, and we actually weathered the storm pretty well in the face of adversity. I've got to say a big thank you to the LIDNUG staff that were in attendance at this event today, because without you guys sat there behind the scenes, everything here would have just crumbled into a big smouldering heap. And neither myself or Jeremy would have been able to do anything about it. So give yourselves all a great big pat on the back for today's efforts, guys. It truly was a team effort. We got through it, and Jeremy delivered a great presentation.
Thank you.
Very informative. We'd like to invite you to come back at some time in the future. Hopefully next time we won't have any problems. I mean, what do you say? You say yes?
Yes, absolutely. I would love the opportunity to come back. That would I would love that opportunity. I would be more than happy to come back any time that you would have me.
Absolutely fantastic. Well, big round of applause, and once again, thank you very much.